your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for joining us this Thanksgiving weekend for a look at what made headlines this past week. Well, social media was blowing up this week with many discussing the controversy surrounding the Jasper wildfire. Firefighters, along with their fire trucks, were allegedly turned away back in July, just 3 days after the fires broke out, destroying a third of Jasper and displacing around 2,000 residents. Toronto Sun political columnist Brian Lilly chatted with BCN's Hal Roberts about why firefighters were turned away from such a devastating wildfire.
They had a command and control structure that excluded anyone outside. So they worked with the town of Jasper, but they didn't work with the province. And this company that showed up, it was 20 private fire trucks, a company called Arctic Fire Services. They do firefighting in northern Canada. They are contracted to do it. They're equipped, they're qualified. They could have gone in to help, but they were turned away. That was coming out at a Commons committee on Monday, along with the testimony from Deputy Premier Ellis, basically denouncing how the federal government was operating. You know, we keep hearing, well, there's more wildfires due to climate change. Well, perhaps wildfires have always been with us. And what is also driving wildfires is the lack of preparation, the lack of controlled burns, the lack of forest management. Forest management practices were put into place to deal with wildfires, which are natural. There has been a move to back away from that and just leave things as they were naturally. Well, that results in more forest fires. So the minister has been grilled about the dead tree stands. He told the MPs on the committee, some of whom were from Alberta and affected by this, that, oh, well, you just don't understand how things work. Stephen Guilbeault's been very arrogant on this. The whole federal government has been very arrogant on this. But I still think that they have a lot of questions to answer for.
Meantime, Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault was in Jasper this week meeting with local officials. He'll be responsible for coordinating federal resources with the province, the municipality, and Indigenous groups. The Alberta government announced a new tentative 4-year compensation agreement has been reached with resident physicians. Officials say the new deal provides wage increases of 3% in each of the first 2 years and 2% in each of the last 2 years. It also includes market adjustments that will put the province on par with other Western Canadian medical schools. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says this new deal will help to address Alberta's health workforce challenges.
Resident physicians are truly critical to the healthcare system, representing the future of medicine in our province. Resident physicians are those who have graduated medical school but are completing postgraduate training in a residency program to obtain their license to practice. And as they complete their training, they are most often involved in a patient's first medical contact in teaching hospitals and clinics throughout the province.
In response, Sarah Hoffman, the Alberta NDP health critic, released a statement which in part said, quote, unless this UCP government stops stalling and signs the agreement they have already reached with physicians, many will go to other provinces as soon as they complete their residency, end quote. Meantime, the Friends of Medicare say 2 doctors will be leaving the Campbell Clinic in Lethbridge. One physician pointed her finger at the Alberta government for her decision to leave. Dr. Jessica Vandersloot and Dr. Jarrett Stephenson will both be leaving at the end of December. Dr. Vandersloot, in a letter to her patients, had this to say, quote, there have been many promises made to help shore up the desperate situation in family medicine, but no meaningful change. The funding model for family docs, which is similar to that being used in BC, was pitched to the government more than a year ago. We were assured it would be in place by the fall, and now it's unclear if it will happen at all. This is just one of many frustrations and delays that have made it increasingly challenging to work in this system. In other news, the final portion of a complaint brought forward by Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips from an incident involving Lethbridge police has finally been put to rest. Lethbridge Police Service reprimanded an officer this week in connection with improperly accessing information involving the former MLA back in 2018. In 2020, a complaint was issued by Phillips that 3 Lethbridge police officers and 1 civilian employee improperly accessed her information on the police database. The investigation by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team concluded that 2 officers, including 1 still employed by LPS, Constable Joel Odorsky, may have committed criminal offenses. However, the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service claimed the test for prosecution was not met and charges would not be laid. The LPS did, however, find Constable Odorsky guilty of discreditable conduct and insubordination and was sanctioned through a reprimand as a result, which will remain on his record of discipline for 3 years, according to LPS. All disciplinary matters are now concluded based on the investigation. Jay McMillan is the president of the Lethbridge Police Association. Now, he responded to the LPS reprimanding the officer and joined Hal Roberts earlier this week to say that it wasn't as serious an offense as the community thinks and that not every member of LPS should be painted with the same tainted brush. Take a look.
Jay, you say the investigation initiated by ACERT was able to validate the access as legitimate and related to policing duties, with the exception of 2 officers?
Allegations were made that a number of officers had done what was alleged to have been illegal searches on a police database, but the allegation was made before, obviously, any investigation. I think it was reported on before any investigation was done. And at the onset of the investigation, ACERT was able to quickly identify those whose access to Ms. Phillips' personal information on the police database was legitimate and related to their policing duties. So they were exonerated very early on, and there were 2 remaining who had just some questions yet to be answered.
Now, Jay, you believe that there have been inaccurate accounts, unfair broad accusations, and speculations aimed at men and women of the Lethbridge Police Service. Not all within the LPS should be painted with the same brush here?
A lot of people have been reading about what the Lethbridge Police Service has done, what Lethbridge police officers have done in relation to Ms. Phillips. And listen, there's 180 people here who have done absolutely nothing. So I think it gets a bit tiring to hear about all the negative things LPS has done when there's been a few isolated incidents of misconduct. And really, this is only one that's left, and a minor one at that.
Now, you argue the reports that former MLA Phillips's police database information was accessed to target her for being a woman or for her political affiliation with the NDP were wildly inaccurate. Can you explain?
Any allegations that she was targeted for being a woman or for being the NDP are inaccurate because there's just no basis for it. There's no merit in that argument. Furthermore, there's actually some evidence to suggest that it's quite the opposite. The only person who has suffered any kind of consequence for a misconduct misconducted themselves in defense of Ms. Phillips. And I think that's been either overlooked or misrepresented throughout the course of this drama.
Jay McMillan, president of the Lethbridge Police Association, thanks so much for your time today.
The season is upon us to sit around the table, break bread, and enjoy the food produced by the summer and fall harvest. I'm talking about Thanksgiving, of course, but there wouldn't be a harvest without farmers. Up next, we're joined by the Alberta Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, who discusses the impact of carbon tax on our farmers.
Well, it is a major impact, and it's a major impact right down to the consumer. I've said that I believe there's more layers of the carbon tax on the food that we buy in the grocery stores than probably any other essential commodity that people have to buy on a daily basis. We continue to have conversations with the federal government to look at ending the carbon tax on all agricultural related products, because when we talk about food affordability, that's really all it's doing. Our agri-food processors are paying heavy carbon tax right down to the logistics of moving our commodities throughout the province and across the country are impacted by the carbon tax, which just does nothing but raise the price of food in the grocery store for everyday Albertans and Canadians.
Now, the federal government is wanting to see Alberta farmers significantly reduce their use of nitrogen-based fertilizers in their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. RJ, Have you been pushing back on this or complying with Ottawa?
Well, I've been pushing back. Our farmers and ranchers use the right amount of fertilizer, and that's the message I've been expressing to the federal government. We have 4R here that includes right rate, right amount, right fertilizer. These are the policies that our farmers implement every single year in order to maximize their yields, which I believe is the key to sustainable farming practices and maximizing on the acres to be able to grow the most food possible. Um, at the price of fertilizer, our farmers use only what they need. And that's to be able to make sure that they have a maximum opportunity every year to have the greatest yield possible. And I continue to have that conversation with the federal government in making them recognize that our farmers and ranchers are true stewards of the land. And over the past decades, they have always done everything possible to improve soil health and to be able to, make sure that they recognize the importance of moving forward in the environmental and sustainable farming practices. Every farmer I talk to is focused on it. And I just continue to advocate on their behalf on the federal level to make the feds understand that we do have the greatest farmers and ranchers in the world moving forward in those environmental practices.
Now, speaking of which, where are we at when it comes to family farms? I know a number of farmers are retiring right now. Are we seeing more young people wanting to get involved in the agriculture sector? What kind of incentives are we maybe offering the younger generation?
Well, I think one of the concerns that we do have as a provincial government, something we're keeping a close eye on, is the fact that the average age of a farmer rancher right now continues to be on the rise here in Alberta. And when we look at opportunities for the next generation to move into farming and ranching, we want to continue to support programs that help. And that's why our next generation loans through AFSC, we've made some recent changes to that to extend the amount available and as well the eligibility requirements to open that up and just try to get that door a little bit further open and continue to educate the next generation on how much opportunity there is in the agricultural space in the future.
Now, Alberta's food processing sector is the second largest manufacturing industry here in the province, and we have a lot of it right here in southern Alberta, as we discussed earlier, and it's been expanding. Do you think we'll see that trend continue?
I think that trend is going to continue. When we talk about Alberta having the best tax jurisdiction in all of Canada, we combine that with our processing investment tax credit, a 12% non-refundable tax credit for those that invest 10 million or more here in the province of Alberta. And that's why we've just seen so much investment happening between P&H, Imperial with their biofuel, and we see Cavendish, McCain's expansion happening across the province. On average, we saw about $500 million worth of investment happening in the province of Alberta roughly every year. This year alone, we're going to see $3.2 billion worth of investment come to the province. And we've really become a beacon for the agri-processing investment, and it's very exciting. It strengthens our agricultural industry right down to the family farm, which it's very exciting. And that's why I continue to advocate to our youth about the opportunities in agriculture for the future.
And speaking of farmers and crops, it turns out that despite a fairly dry spring and summer, crops were not affected by drought this year, particularly in southern Alberta. In fact, the ag sector in this area of the province is seeing strong prices for producers. Here is part of my interview with the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge.
This is, again, the largest sector for the local economy. Agri-food and agribusiness drives southern Alberta, so it is critical for us. We have seen pretty strong commodity and cattle prices, for example, over this year. Prices have held steady, and cattle, in fact, has increased, driving some people to sell and make some money on their herds. As I mentioned off the top of the show, we're very fortunate in that the drought we were anticipating did not materialize. Still some concern, of course, about the levels of moisture going into next year, but certainly nothing like what we thought could have happened, sort of the worst case scenarios. So that has in fact, helped crop yields, allowed producers to get, generally their regular income that they would have seen. We avoided that debt crunch. But locally, we've also seen significant investments. So McCain Foods, their $600 million expansion in Lethbridge County, doubling the size of production will drive potato consumption for years to come, and the need for more potato acres. And then the investment by New Cold in Coaldale to build a $220 million frozen storage and distribution facility. These are big construction projects that will drive, jobs in the short term in the construction sector, but also long term as they're staffed and that they continue to grow. So again, the whole sector seems to be performing well at this point.
Okay, great. Now, how about the surrounding southern Alberta communities? How are they doing economically? Anything of note happening there? That would be the smaller towns and whatnot.
Yeah, those two big projects along Canada's premier food corridor along Highway 3, of course, are helping provide spin-off benefits to all of the communities along that corridor. We have seen in Fort Macleod a major expansion by structural truss. Anyone that's driving along Highway 3 will have seen the big buildings going up along the highway. So that's been an exciting development in that region. And interestingly enough, the town of Taber is celebrating their 120th anniversary next year. And as a part of that discussion, they're sort of debating whether or not to become a city and whether or not changing their name and sort of going after a different branding makes some sense. So I think it speaks to the region. We've seen a number of communities grow over the last year. Our whole region grows quite well relative to the rest of the country. And we may actually have another city on the map very close to us soon.
Yeah, and it could be the corn capital of Canada. Who knows, right? We all love the Taber corn. They're famous for it. So why not just capitalize on that, right?
Exactly. Might as well build on a successful brand when you can.
Exactly. So, Trevor, what are you hearing from the construction industry? You mentioned some big projects happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those big projects like McCain and New Cold are certainly driving the major project side. We've had renovations of the Chinook Regional Hospital. So there's a number of institutional projects, a new school on the west side of Lethbridge, for example, driving the sector. The other thing we've seen gain is also on residential construction. So housing starts are actually up compared to last year and up about 8% over the 5-year average. So looking back, housing starts are up, which is good. We need more housing, but that also in turn drives a significant chunk of the construction industry. So again, all indications there are quite positive, especially after a few years of declines and massive spikes in costs. We're starting to see that come back around.
And what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge is headed, economically speaking, over the next 6 months, Trevor?
Yeah, I think overall it's good news. Everything we've talked about so far, there are many positive things that we should be excited about. I'm not too concerned about the short-term forecast. One thing we do need to be mindful of, though, is the brewing dispute between Canada and China over canola. So, the government of Canada recently announced an increase in tariffs on electric vehicles and electric batteries from China, 100% tariff. So China's undertaken a review, in quotation marks, of our exports and our practices with canola. And I think it's important for people to realize that Canada is the largest shipper of canola in the world, and China is the largest importer. And a good chunk of that affects the local economy here. Canola is a big crop in southern Alberta. So depending where that goes, there could be some major concerns in the market next year.
According to Stats Canada, the number of Canadians who are over 100 years of age is growing. In the 2021 census, close to 10,000 centenarians were recorded, most living in BC, Ontario, and Quebec. Foremost Alberta, however, is home to 102-year-old Charlie Luca, who not only lives completely independently, but also travels half the year and hits 9 holes of golf each and every day. I caught up with Luca on the fairway in Foremost to find out what his secret to a long life is.
Oh.
Golf can be a frustrating game.
I'm short.
And it doesn't seem to get easier with age.
That one went up in the air.
Or experience. Just ask a Charlie Luca.
No, I'm not a good golfer. I like the exercise.
Luca is 102 years old and still hits the links every single day.
Every day that the weather is good.
And when he isn't golfing here,
when in the winter I go south to California and play golf there.
Other than an operation for cataracts, Luca is relatively healthy. He wears no corrective lenses and no hearing aids.
Well, I get by. The guys are telling me I should see an audiologist, but And for seeing the ball, I can't see it very well. They tell me where the ball is.
The guys are his much younger group of friends.
You know, those are all young guys, you know. I don't think there's even one of them that's 90 yet.
Yet Luca, who's constantly leaving his friends in the dust, doesn't appear to wait for anyone on the course.
He likes to go quickly when he plays. That's just all there is to it. He likes to play, doesn't like to sit around.
Bill Nickel is the youngest one in the group. At age 63, he was just a kid when he met his much senior co-players.
He's always getting away on us. Yeah, like he just did here, like 50 yards ahead.
A 9-hole course takes the average person about 2 hours to complete, but with Luca...
Oh, hour and 45, yeah.
That's Charlie.
Yep, because you have to have coffee at 3, right? So we got to be off the course at 3.
And you may notice he's the one driving his own cart, which means he still has his driver's license, and not just so he can zip around the golf course.
And I drive down to California too.
You heard that right. This snowbird doesn't spread his wings to fly. He uses 4 wheels and drives his own truck to his winter home in California every year. Born and raised in Foremost, Alberta, Luca farmed until 1977, then spent a decade in Botswana as a grain seller.
I've been single all my life. I never got married.
Is that the secret to your longevity?
Well, that's what the guys jazzed me about, yes.
Although the centenarian never married, has no children or grandchildren, he doesn't feel like he's missed out.
I've been going to Belgium, where my parents came from, pretty well every September. This is the first year that I did not.
So what is the secret to his longevity?
I think he's got really good genes, and I mean, he's very, very particular about what he eats, and he has a glass of wine every night and a piece of cheese.
I think that's just circumstance, I suppose. I don't know why. It just happened, and I was lucky that it happened for me.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. A little beer, a little wine, and a few bets may not seem like much, but then again, it doesn't take much for some people to get addicted to these vices. After the break, the story of a man who overcame these addictions. Welcome back. In a world where addictions seem to be on the rise, there are also those who manage to overcome them. Gambling is one of those addictions that affects both men and women. And according to researchers, 6 in 10 Canadians have spent money on gambling. The research also shows the annual contribution in revenue from Canada's online gambling industry reached around $3.1 billion by the end of 2023. BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the story of one man who overcame his addictions.
Behavioral and substance. These are 2 addictions that we hear about every year. Gambling, overeating, and internet are just a few of the large number of behavioral addictions. While in the area of substance abuse, we find dependence on drugs, nicotine, or alcohol. Dave M. started drinking around the age of 16. A little beer and a little wine seemed harmless for him. However, this triggered the great monster of addictions that came into his life.
And was playing pool for money at 15, 16 years old. And then when we were kids, we used to be able to go to bingo with our mom and watch her play bingo because it wasn't against the law to go there. So everybody thought we thought it was a social behavior, not an addiction. I started drinking when I was probably 16, 17 years old. And back then, I drank until I got sick all the time. I just escaped reality and gambling, and then you don't think about nothing till all your money was gone and then you were broke. They won over $100,000 total and ended up coming back with only $1,000 each. And then after that, when we got back to Bow Island, we were gambling every day.
Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and even Las Vegas witnessed his addictions. During those tours, Dave not only lost money in his 3 marriages, but also part of his life due to addiction, to the point that he contemplated suicide. This made him hit bottom and seek help. There he realized that the loving God had been waiting for many years for Dave to open his heart, to give him the necessary strength.
When I switched addictions to the gambling, after years, I found myself in this program. So God has kept me away from it. He's taken away a lot of my urges to gamble. And in the first years, it was really tough. And there was a song, Lord Help Me, Jesus, I've wasted this time. And I used to basically hum it in my head or think about it and stuff. And He's helped me all along the way with both my addictions, because God is a loving God. A lot of people don't know they have a problem. I didn't know I had a problem with the gambling until I did come into these rooms and realized that it was bad. All a choice, whether I gamble or drink, it's my choice. And because of the strength that I've got through this program and through God, which God I classify as good orderly direction.
His decision was to overcome addictions with Jesus' help, who gives his good orderly direction. This year, Dave has been 34 years without drinking alcohol, 27 years without gambling, and 12 years without smoking. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Well, we just came out of Prevention Week 2024, and the theme this year, smoke alarms, make them work for you. It's to remind communities to keep smoke detectors up to date. The fire chief of Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, Troy Hicks, explains the importance of keeping these devices working properly.
And as time goes on, their importance grows more and more due to the fact of the different types of materials people have in their homes. You know, maybe 20 years ago, we had a lot more time to get out once that smoke detector went off. Now that time is not very much. You might have 1 or 2 minutes to get out of your home once a smoke detector starts to go off. New materials now, pillows, couches, anything like that, the chemicals that are in them to make them light, all that other stuff is pure petroleum products. The smoke that goes off is extremely toxic. The number of false alarm calls we go to that are caused by either expired smoke detectors or their batteries are dying, you're closer to the 70% or higher. So if you're starting to hear sounds like this every now and then, it'll just kind of beep every few minutes as I'm talking. It'll mean that either one, the detector's expired, as you just heard there, or two, the battery is going. They have a life expectancy of 10 years.
Research reveals that every year there are 24,000 house fires in Canada. With the high cost of living these days, having to buy multiple pairs of shoes for growing kids can wear on parents' nerves, not to mention wallets. After the break, we speak with a certified podorthist who gives advice about choosing the right footwear for your kids.